I want to tell you about a morning I'd rather forget. It was early. The kind of early where the room is still blue and the world hasn't fully committed to being awake yet. I was sitting at my kitchen table, coffee going cold in front of me, phone in my hand. I don't know how long I'd been there. 20 minutes, maybe more. I hadn't eaten, hadn't opened the curtains, hadn't said a word to anyone. But I had read 17 news headlines, scrolled through 2 feeds, watched a video I can't even remember, checked my email, and then checked it again. And when I finally put the phone down and looked up at the window, at the light just beginning to come through, I felt something strange. Not refreshed, not informed, not connected. I felt like I had already lost something, like the day had started without me. I was 2 hours into being awake, and I was already exhausted. We have a word for mornings like that. We call them lazy, undisciplined, a failure of routine. We tell ourselves, if only I had more willpower. If only I could just put the phone down. If only I were the kind of person who wakes up at 5, journals, drinks water, and greets the morning like it's a gift. But what if we've been diagnosing the wrong thing? What if the problem isn't your character, but your environment? What if you're not failing the morning? The morning has been designed to fail you. To understand what's actually happening, we need to talk about your brain, specifically about dopamine. And I want to be careful here because dopamine has become one of the most misunderstood words on the internet. You've heard it called the pleasure chemical, the reward hormone, something to detox from. But that's not quite right. Dopamine isn't really about pleasure, it's about anticipation. It's the neurochemical of wanting, not having, of almost, not yet. When neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz studied dopamine in the 1990s, he discovered something counterintuitive. Dopamine neurons fire most intensely, not when a reward arrives, but when a reward is predicted. The brain is a prediction machine, and dopamine is how it registers the gap between what it expected and what it got. This is why slot machines are so potent, not because they always pay out, but because they sometimes do, unpredictably. The uncertainty itself is the drug, and this precise mechanic is what your phone runs on. Every feed, every notification, every pull to refresh, engineered around the same principle that keeps a gambler at a machine at 3 in the morning, convinced the next pull might be different. Variable rewards, the neuroscience of almost. The difference between a slot machine and your phone is that your phone came free with a 2-year contract, and it's in your pocket every hour of every day. But this isn't really a story about dopamine. Dopamine is the mechanism. What I want to talk about is the cost, not the productivity cost. We hear enough about that. I want to talk about what it does to how we feel, to who we are, to the people we're supposed to be present for. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from constant connection. You are never alone, and yet you are always somehow elsewhere. You're at dinner, but you're also half monitoring a conversation happening in your pocket. You're with your child, watching them do something they're proud of, and part of you is already composing a caption. You're in the moment, and you're documenting the moment. And those two things, it turns out, are not the same thing. Psychologists call this continuous partial attention. We are never fully anywhere. We are perpetually divided, skimming the surface of every experience, present enough to say we were there, but too fragmented to actually feel it. And over time, this creates a cost that is hard to name, but easy to feel. A kind of hollowness, an inability to settle, a restlessness that follows you even into sleep. We mistake it for boredom. We treat it with more stimulation, and the cycle deepens. The philosopher Blaise Pascal wrote in 1654 that all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. He didn't have a smartphone, but he saw something we are only now beginning to understand neurologically, that the capacity to be still, to be with ourselves without distraction, is not a luxury, it is a foundation, and we have quietly surrendered it. Here is something worth sitting with. 30 years ago, boredom was structural, unavoidable, woven into the texture of ordinary life. You waited for the bus without anything to look at. You sat in a waiting room with last month's magazines. You drove without a podcast. You cooked without a screen propped up on the counter. And in those empty intervals, those unscheduled, unoptimized pockets of nothing,
something essential was happening in your brain. Neuroscientists call it default mode network activity. When your mind is given nothing external to process, it turns inward, it integrates, it consolidates memory, it makes connections, it daydreams. And daydreaming, it turns out, is not a waste of time. It is how we become ourselves. We didn't lose this capacity. It's still there. We traded it quietly, incrementally, app by app, update by update, without ever being asked if we wanted to make the trade. The most significant shift in human consciousness in the last century happened largely without our consent, and most of us don't even feel it as a loss. We feel it as normal. I think we need to let ourselves feel how much has changed. Not to despair, but because you can't repair something you haven't first acknowledged as broken. There is a quieter version of your life waiting, where you read a book for an hour without once feeling the pull to check something, where you have a conversation that lives entirely in the room where it happens, where you sit with a feeling long enough to understand it rather than reaching for something to make it go away, where you are, fully and without apology, where you are. That version of your life is not gone. It is not naive. It is not impossible. It is waiting on the other side of some very intentional choices. So what do we do? I want to be honest with you. Willpower is not the answer. Not because you are weak, but because willpower was never designed to operate against a system engineered by thousands of engineers specifically to defeat it. That is not a fair fight, and you should stop blaming yourself for losing it. What we need is not more discipline. What we need is better architecture. The first principle is sanctuary. Every home needs at least one space where the phone simply does not exist, not silenced, not face down, not within reach. Not there. A table where meals happen without screens. A bedroom that is for sleeping and conversation and nothing else. You don't have to change your whole life, but you need one room that belongs to the analog world. The second principle is contiguous time. Fragmented attention is not rest. Scrolling for 20 minutes does not restore you. It depletes you. True rest requires continuity. 90 minutes of reading, an hour of walking without headphones, a conversation that is allowed to go deep because no one is checking anything. Depth requires duration. You can't drop into it for 2 minutes between notifications. The third principle is tactile reality. There is something screens cannot give you: the sensation of physical material, paper under a pen, soil between fingers, the weight of a book, the grain of wood. These things do not optimize for engagement. They don't have algorithms. They give back exactly what you put in. And in this moment of history, that is almost radical. When your hands are doing something real, your mind follows them into the present. The fourth principle is community without performance. Human beings evolved for face-to-face, unmediated, unrecorded connection, the kind that happens when two people are in the same room and there is nowhere else either of them could be. We have more ways to communicate than any generation in history, and many of us have never felt more alone. Connection was never meant to be content, and presence was never meant to be a performance. I'm not asking you to delete everything. I'm not proposing a cabin in the woods. I know technology has given us genuine gifts: medicine, knowledge, closeness with people we love across distances that would have made our grandparents weep. I'm not against the modern world. I live in it the same as you. But I do think we've been sold a quiet, comfortable, well-designed lie. The lie that more information is the same as more understanding, that more connection is the same as less loneliness, that staying current is the same as being alive. Your brain is plastic. That's not a metaphor, it's neuroscience. The pathways carved deep by years of compulsive scrolling can be redirected. Not overnight, not perfectly, but genuinely. Every time you choose to finish a thought before picking up the phone, you are building something. Every time you sit with discomfort instead of reaching for distraction, you are recovering a capacity that was always yours. Slowness is not falling behind. It is the precondition for depth, for meaning, for the kind of life that at the end of it actually feels like it was yours. Remember that morning I told you about? The blue room, the cold coffee, the 17 headlines? I still have mornings like that sometimes. I probably always will. But I also have mornings now where I don't reach for the phone first, where I sit with the light coming through the window, where the day feels for a moment. Those mornings didn't require a new app or a 5-step system or a paid subscription. They just required a small, daily choice to be somewhere fully. Next week, I'm going to tell you what happened when I spent 30 days with a phone that could only call and text, what I lost, what I found, and what it showed me about the version of myself I'd been too distracted to meet. I'll see you then.